Burevestnik, Sarmat, Kinzhal, Poseidon, Avanguard, Peresvet, Burevestnik. On paper, these are Russia's so-called superweapons. They're touted as next-generation weapons, with the exception of the Burevestnik, capable of carrying and delivering strategic nuclear warheads in new ways that NATO is currently not capable of countering. These weapons are intended to intimidate Western nations and deter further involvement in Ukraine or confrontation with Russia. However, limited evidence of their use and lack of proof regarding their capabilities have led some Western experts to question both their effectiveness and even their existence. Could these weapons just be a grand bluff by Russian President Vladimir Putin, a threat that can be shrugged off without too much concern, or is that view hubris of the most dangerous kind? Let's examine the evidence to find out. Certainly, bluffing about superweapons as a way of scaring off potential NATO aggression was standard operating procedure for the Soviet Union, particularly in the 1950s and 1960s. In one famous example, the Soviets wheeled truly enormous missiles out during a massive military parade in Red Square in 1965, with Soviet radio commentators ominously warning that there are no limits to what these missiles can do. The display of these new, scary weapons made headlines around the world and caused great consternation in the West. But little did people know that there were no actual weapons there on that day, only fakes. As former KGB chairman Vladimir Semychastny revealed in his memoirs, the missiles were simply fakes, a bit like a Potemkin village, and that they absolutely have no ability to fly. The models being pulled by the tractors weren't missiles, they were replicas. He also confessed that this kind of deception was a regular occurrence, one of the main ways the Soviets used to keep the US, in particular, guessing about Russia's true capabilities and thus less likely to attack. So, could the same be true of Russia's supposed superweapons today? Well, we do have confirmed reports from Western sources that at least some of these weapons have been used in combat in Ukraine or publicly tested, so they aren't complete fakes. With others, we pretty much have only the claims of Putin and other Russian military top brass to go by. The Burevestnik, also known as SSC X-9 Skyfall, is a nuclear-powered nuclear-armed cruise missile with a purportedly unlimited range. It's designed to evade missile defense systems by flowing at low altitudes and using a groundbreaking compact onboard nuclear reactor for propulsion. Moscow claims it to be invisible to radar due to its terrain-hugging flight profile and unpredictable ballistic arc, making interception extremely difficult. In October 2025, Putin announced the completion of new tests, which were verified by Norwegian monitors, calling it a unique weapon system that no other country possesses. The missile had previously been reported to have a range exceeding 6,200 miles and can carry a nuclear warhead, with some estimates suggesting a cruise speed of Mach 8 to 9. However, in the latest test, the missile allegedly covered a distance of over 8,700 miles during a 15-hour flight. If these reports are true, and the miniature nuclear reactor that supposedly powers the missile works as they say it does, the missile certainly represents a system that, at least for the meantime, the West can't match. The US, still the Western leader in advanced military tech by a substantial margin, hasn't developed a similar nuclear-powered cruise missile. It is in the process of developing long-range, conventionally armed hypersonic cruise missiles such as the AGM-183A ARRW and the Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile, or HACM, which are designed for extended range and survivability like the Burevestnik. However, these are not nuclear-powered, and thus no Western system matches the Burevestnik's claimed capabilities. The Kinzhal, also known as the KH-47M2 Dagger, is an air-launched ballistic missile capable of reaching speeds of Mach 10 and performing evasive maneuvers throughout its flight. It's launched from modified MiG-31K fighter jets and has a purported range of up to 1,240 miles. The missile can carry both conventional and nuclear warheads, and there's little doubt that conventionally armed variants have been used quite extensively in Ukraine. The Russians claim it is hypersonic, although some experts have cast shade on that claim, saying it doesn't share all the characteristics of a truly hypersonic missile. The Russians also claim it's almost impossible to bring down, a claim Ukraine strongly refutes. In fact, since 2023, Ukraine has regularly claimed to have shot down Kinzhal missiles, with at least 15 reported shot down by the end of 2023. However, besides debris from one downed missile, which was not 100% confirmed to be Kinzhal wreckage, there doesn't seem to be much hard evidence to support these claims. Likewise, in November 2025, Ukraine's Night Watch unit claimed that its lunar electronic warfare system caused at least 21 Kinzhal missiles to miss their targets and fall harmlessly into fields using a technique called spoofing. In essence, Ukraine hacks into the Russian GLONASS satellite guidance system, an analogue of GPS, that guides the Kinzhal precisely to its target, changing the coordinates so it lands somewhere harmless instead. Again, besides a few images of debris claimed to be from errant Kinzhals that landed harmlessly, there's little hard evidence available with which to verify these claims. Ukraine also claims to have shot down at least one Zirkon missile, with debris from one downed missile not conclusive, but strongly suggesting it was indeed a Zirkon that was shot down. Certainly, the Zirkon has not been used anywhere near as prolifically as the Kinzhal, which itself has been used sparingly in comparison to Russia's Iskander-M ground-launched missile and its Geran 2 and Geran 3 analogues of the Iranian Shahed 136. The Zirkon, or 3M22, is a sea-launched hypersonic cruise missile powered by a scramjet engine, supposedly capable of reaching hypersonic speeds of Mach 9. It's designed to be launched from surface ships and submarines and is primarily intended to target enemy naval forces and coastal installations. However, Russia has reportedly used Zirkons to strike as far as inland as Ukraine's northern Sumy Oblast. Technically, the AGM-183A ARRW and HACM are Western missile systems comparable in firepower, deployment method, and function to the Kinzhal and Zirkon respectively. However, as both of these US systems are still in development and appear to be some way off serial production, while Russia has clearly already had Kinzhal and Zirkon missiles in active service and production, at this point neither missile has a working analogue in the West. And while Ukraine's claims about its proficiency in shooting them down largely required taking Ukrainian and other anti-Russian Western authorities at their word, the massive destruction that these missiles cause when they aren't brought down is self-evident. At least with these three supposed super weapons, the Burevestnik, Kinzhal and Zirkon, skepticism about their actual capabilities aside, there's little doubt that they exist. For the other three, proof of their existence is still primarily in the form of statements by Putin and other Russian leaders and the odd technical diagram and dated clip. The RS-28 Sarmat, also known as SSX-30, is a heavy liquid-fueled nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, designed to replace older systems like the UR-100N, UTTX, and RS-26 Rubez. Russia claims that it's capable of carrying multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, or MIRVs, and has a range exceeding 11,000 miles and a launch weight of over 208 metric tons. The Sarmat is intended to ensure Russia's retaliatory strike capability and is considered a key component of its strategic arsenal. Putin announced in February 2024 that the first mass-produced Sarmats had been delivered to troops, with plans to demonstrate them in deployment areas. However, satellite imagery and defense reports indicate a failed Sarmat test in September 2024 at the Plesiets Cosmodrome, which resulted in the destruction of a launch silo, with Russian authorities noticeably silent about the results of the test. So, it's quite possible that the Sarmat could be another scary Russian giant missile bluff, straight from the Soviet playbook. However, if it's not a bluff, again like the previous weapons we've discussed at this point, the West doesn't possess a direct competitor. Sooner or later, the US's LGM-35A Sentinel, intended to replace its legacy Minuteman III ICBMs, will be ready for deployment. Like the Sarmat, it's designed for long-range survivable nuclear deterrence and is intended to counter missile defense systems, MIRVs, and advanced maneuvering capabilities. However, until that happens, assuming the Sarmat is an actual thing, it also offers Russia a strategic advantage that the West can't currently match. At least we have a failed test to indicate that the Sarmat is in active development, if not on active duty. The same cannot be said about the Avanguard hypersonic glide vehicle. The system has been reported as being on combat duty since 2019, with a video of a test launch released by the Russian Ministry of Defense in 2021. Putin reiterated his operational status in the aforementioned 2024 address. However, no recent physical test has been independently confirmed. The Russians have described the Avanguard as a new type of strategic weapon capable of penetrating any missile defense system. It's supposed to be a hypersonic glide vehicle equipped with a nuclear or conventional warhead and carried by ICBMs such as the Sarmat and the RS-26 Rubez. It's supposedly capable of reaching speeds of up to Mach 20, almost 6 miles per second, and performing sharp, unpredictable maneuvers during flight, making it highly resistant to interception. Again, if the Avanguard is, as Putin claims, fully operational and already deployed and ready for action, it would represent a strategic advantage for Russia over the West that the West can't match. In this case, however, the US isn't far behind. Both the Hypersonic Conventional Strike Weapon, or HCSW, and the Advanced Hypersonic Weapon, or AHW, part of the US Department of Defense hypersonic research and development efforts, are deep in development. When they're ready, they'll offer similar or extended capabilities to those theoretically offered by the Avanguard. The same can't be said about Boeing's Orca Extra Large Unmanned Underwater Vehicle, or XLUUV, which is the closest comparable weapon in development in the West to Russia's Poseidon. The Poseidon, also known as Status 6 or Canyon, if it works as it says on the box, is a pretty revolutionary and terrifying weapon. It's supposedly a nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed, unmanned underwater vehicle designed to travel at high speeds of up to 150 miles per hour and depths of up to 3,280 feet. Russia claims it uses the same mini-reactor used to power the Burevestnik, which is very stealthy and almost impossible to detect. It can carry a thermonuclear warhead of up to 100 megatons, which is capable of generating a tsunami wave of up to 1,650 feet tall. The idea is that it could be surreptitiously moved into an enemy port or estuary, parked indefinitely, then detonated to create a radioactive tsunami that covers and renders uninhabitable vast areas inland of the blast. As such, the Poseidon is intended as a deterrent weapon of last resort and is expected to be deployed on specialized submarines such as the Project 09852 Belgorod and Project 09851 Habares class. We've been hearing stories about it for years and even seen a few technical diagrams and a video of it being tested. But an actual working Poseidon has yet to be spotted in the wild, despite Russia claiming in October 2025 that it had been successfully tested and would soon be serially deployed. With Boeing already having delivered the first Orca in late 2023, the US is likely several steps ahead of the Russians in development of its own underwater super weapon. However, the Orca is not nuclear powered or designed to carry nuclear warheads, so it can't really be seen as a direct analogue. So, if Poseidon is a product of reality and not fiction, it represents another strategic threat that the West can't match, at least not yet. The US is also hot on the heels, or possibly even ahead of Russia, with respect to the Russian Peresvet laser system. And other nations such as China, Iran and various NATO members are also known to be working on similar systems. The Peresvet is supposedly a ground-based, truck-mounted high-energy laser weapon system, declared operational on December 1, 2018, and reportedly already on active combat duty. It's designed to disable or destroy low-flying drones, electro-optical sensors, and potentially small aircraft or even satellites. A clip released by the Russian MOD in 2018 shows a military unit operating at least 2 Peresvet combat laser systems with accompanying command and support vehicles. The turret-mounted laser system is shown moving, but there are no clips, live or computer-generated, of the directed energy weapon in operation to give a sense of its capabilities. Indeed, the exact power and operational parameters remain classified, but it's similar in concept to the laser weapon systems in development by the US. Systems like the Tactical High Energy Laser, or THEL, and the High Energy Laser Mobile Demonstrator, or HEL-MD, are in development, while the US Navy has operationally deployed the High Energy Laser with Integrated Optical Dazzler and Surveillance, or Helios system, on its Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers. Of all Russia's supposedly super weapons, this is the least super, It doesn't carry a nuclear threat, and the US appears to have already matched or exceeded its capabilities, or to be very close behind. Taken together, these supposed superweapon systems offer new ways to deliver nuclear strikes from land, air and sea, along with a laser platform. The much debated Burevestnik may additionally add the ability to strike with conventional warheads that burn at unbelievable temperatures at intermediate distances, i.e. anywhere in Europe, and at hypersonic speeds, causing comparable damage to a tactical nuclear weapon but without the radiation. The October 2025 announcement by Putin and Chief of Staff Valery Gerasimov that the Burevestnik and Poseidon had been successfully tested, and separately that the Burevestnik had entered serial production and was being deployed, including to Belarus, was seen by some observers as a direct threat that Russia intends to use them. However, for others, the real goal of these announcements was primarily a political ploy. In a meeting with Ukrainian officials in Kyiv in mid-November, US Army Secretary Dan Driscoll delivered a grim assessment to his Ukrainian counterparts. Ukrainian troops faced a dire situation on the battlefield and would suffer an imminent defeat against Russian forces, two sources with knowledge of the matter told NBC News. Additionally, Driscoll reportedly said the Russians were ramping up the scale and pace of their aerial attacks, and they could fight on indefinitely. The situation for Ukraine would only get worse over time, he continued, so it was better to negotiate a peace settlement now rather than end up in an even weaker position in the future. Moreover, the US delegation also told the Ukrainians that the US defense industry could not keep supplying Ukraine with the weapons and air defenses at the rate needed to protect the country's infrastructure and population. Without US military support, whether delivered as aid or purchased by the Europeans, Ukraine's situation would almost unquestionably deteriorate rapidly. Russian strikes on Ukrainian energy and gas facilities had left the country's energy grid in tatters, just before the onset of what's predicted to be a particularly cold and nasty situation. Despite best efforts to paper over the cracks with heroic tales and flag-raising stunts, it's clear that Ukrainian defences are creaking at the seams from Kupiansk in the north to Huliapolye in the south. Russian troops have even entered the fortress town of Seversk, which has been impregnable since late 2022. The Kyiv Independent, echoing a statement made by many others, said, "With Russia's war effort in Ukraine largely stalled and international support for Kyiv still holding, experts say the real goal of these announcements is primarily political." George Barras for the Institute for the Study of War told the paper that Putin's recent trotting out of these weapon systems is a cognitive warfare effort. It's designed to evoke emotional responses, primarily fear, to shape Western countries' decision-making vis-à-vis Russia and Ukraine, and create intellectual priors that Russians can then exploit in the future. According to Barros and other experts, the primary value of these weapons lies in pressuring the West to reconsider its support for Ukraine by provoking fears of escalation. The message is that if the West keeps escalating in Ukraine, we'll end up in a nuclear exchange where we have weapons you can't cope with. According to Barros, Russia's warfighting capability is limited. It's not capable of winning the war in Ukraine, assuming the international coalition supporting Ukraine remains strong. So Putin depends on us taking ourselves out of the supporting role by worrying about escalation risks and nuclear fears. Given that the administration of President Donald Trump is clearly backing off from heavy involvement in Ukraine, and Europe's questionable ability to keep arming Ukraine or delivering the enormous amounts required to keep Ukraine's state functional, it's debatable just how strong that international support still is. That said, none of the experts questioned by the Kyiv Independent fear a full-blown nuclear exchange in Ukraine itself. As a non-nuclear power, with it currently being practically impossible to see how Ukraine poses the kind of threat to Russia that would trigger its nuclear doctrine, there's little incentive or need for Russia to nuke Ukraine with its full-power strategic nuclear weapons. However, for some, like Ankit Panda, Statton Senior Fellow in the Nuclear Policy Programme at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the rise to prominence of these weapons by Putin does increase the risk of Russia using less powerful but murderously devastating tactical nuclear weapons. The real concern is that conditions on the ground between Ukraine and Russia, or between NATO and Russia, could lead to a place where we actually see the first use of so-called non-strategic or tactical nuclear weapons, Panda told the Kyiv Independent, adding, The tactical nuclear strike would kick off a series of events that results in escalation to a strategic nuclear war. But even in their role as a threat, Barros argues that from a broader strategic perspective, these so-called superweapons do not fundamentally change the logic of nuclear deterrence since the Cold War. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, and the fear of guaranteed retaliation continued to deter major powers from launching a nuclear first strike. If deterrence no longer works, then we have much bigger problems than anything Russia could do in Ukraine, Panda said. Other experts who spoke to Kyiv Independent also brush aside the threat of these weapons. Pavel Podvig, a Geneva-based nuclear arms expert and director of the Russian Nuclear Forces Research Project, says that the Burevestnik functions like a regular cruise missile and thus can be shot down like any other cruise missile. Cruise missiles can be intercepted. If it's subsonic and flying for 10 or 15 hours, you have time to detect it, he told the Kyiv Independent. While technically unique, Podvig argues that the military value of such a system is low, which may explain why no other country has tried to build anything like it. That's largely because the military utility of a system like that is really not very high, he said. Similarly, Dmitry Gorenberg of the Federal Research Group, Center for Naval Analyses, questioned Poseidon's supposed stealth capabilities. It's subject to the same limitations as other underwater systems. It's not silent or invisible, he said. According to the Kyiv Independent, what unites both systems is also what makes them controversial. They're heavily politicized, ambitious, and militarily questionable. Both Podvig and Gorenberg agree with Barros that they exist primarily as political messages, and that the primary value of these weapons now lies in pressuring the West to reconsider its support for Ukraine by provoking fears of escalation. Are they correct? Are all these supposed superweapons just a modern incarnation of the Soviet giant missile's bluff? A desperate attempt by a failing Russia to retain a large element of caution in the West's approach to it? Or are views like these just an attempt to minimize the danger because these weapons raise the stakes in Ukraine and across the West in ways the West for now can't match? Time will tell. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on news of these and Russia's other allegedly advanced new weaponry. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and enable notifications if you want to stay in the loop. Thanks for watching.